Oh my, it is dark, and it is scary, and it is time once again for story time. Now, normally Monday night would be Bram Stoker's Dracula, but tonight I really am feeling scary stories to tell in the dark. Another quick thank you goes out to my friend Trish. She was the one who first recommended reading these, and I must say they are a bit of a blast from the past, something I quite enjoy reading, and I think a good late night treat, as it were. So, tonight I will be reading for you 3 scary stories to tell in the dark, and I do hope you enjoy them. All the while I've got some spooky music playing, and before we do get started, I'll say this. You can find me on Facebook as Brett Picorni. You can also find Storytime, the group page, 2 words, exclamation point at the end. Next, YouTube. Please, if you're watching on YouTube right now, like this video, comment all you wish. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and definitely share it with all your friends. If you're not watching on YouTube, please find it. B Picorni 1, that's the channel. You can't wear it out. And finally, if you so desire, you can follow me on Twitch as well. Brett Doesn't Game, all one word. Now, without further ado, shall we read a few stories to tell in the dark? First up, we are reading one called The Thing. Now, The Thing is a scary story about 2 young boys who see something horrible in a cornfield at night. It is based on a Nova Scotian folk tale in the book Blue-Nosed Ghosts. A version of the story does appear in the book Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and that is the one we will read now. There were 2 young boys named Trevor and Will. They spent most of their summer vacation hanging around town looking for things to do. One hot August night, the boys were sitting on a fence by the main road. There was a cornfield just across the road. Suddenly, Trevor spotted something in the road. In the darkness, it was difficult to make out, but he thought it looked like some kind of weird animal. He nudged his friend and pointed in the direction of the strange-looking figure. Will said he could see it too. He wasn't sure, but the mysterious thing seemed vaguely human. The next thing they knew, the thing was gone. The boys craned their necks and scanned the field with their eyes. Out of the blackness came the thing. It slowly walked over to the edge of the field before disappearing again. Trevor and Will looked at each other, puzzled. "What was that?" asked Will. "I have no idea," replied Trevor. No sooner had he said that than Trevor felt a clammy hand on his shoulder. He turned around and found himself staring directly into the hideous face of the thing. He let out a yell of terror and surprise. The rotting skin on the thing's face was coming off, right off in places, revealing the bone underneath. For a moment it just stared silently at Trevor with its dark, sunken eyes. Then it suddenly grabbed hold of his arm. Trevor felt its fingernails dig into his flesh as he wriggled out of its grasp. The 2 boys leaped off the fence and ran down the road, screaming in terror. They didn't stop running until they reached their homes. They tried to tell their parents and friends about the thing they had seen that night, but nobody believed them. When Trevor woke up the next morning, the scratches on his arm were still there. After a few days, they got worse and worse. Trevor got sick and his parents took him to a doctor. After examining his arm, the doctor told the boy it was infected and gave him some pills to take. Unfortunately, Trevor's condition got worse and worse. The infection spread to his entire arm, and it wasn't long before his flesh was rotting and falling off. He was taken to hospital, but no matter what the doctors did, no treatment seemed to work. The infection spread throughout his whole body. Trevor was confined to bed and started to waste away. It seemed like he was beyond help, and as the days went by, he steadily grew worse and worse. His anguished parents could only sit at his bedside and cry as they watched their beloved son slowly rotting away before their eyes. On the day that Trevor finally passed away, Will came to the hospital to visit him. When the boy walked into the hospital room and saw Trevor lying in bed, he was horrified. His friend looked exactly like the Thing. Oh my. Oh my. Shall we move on to the next one? It's called The Guests. The Guests is a scary story about a young couple who spend the night in a strange old house. It is based on an old folk tale, and a version of the story appears in the book Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. That is a story we will now read. A young man and his wife were on a trip to visit his mother. Usually they arrived in time for supper. They had gotten a late start, and now it was getting dark. They decided to look for a place to stay overnight and go on in the morning. Just off the road they saw a small house in the woods. Maybe they rent rooms, the wife said. So they stopped to ask. An elderly man and woman came to the door. They didn't rent rooms, they said, but they would be glad to have them stay overnight as their guests. They had plenty of room, and they would enjoy the company. The old woman made coffee, brought out some cake, and the four of them talked for a while. Then the young couple were taken to their room. They explained that they wanted to pay for this, but the old man said he would not accept any money. The young couple got up early the next morning before their hosts had awakened. On a table near the front door they left an envelope with some money in it for the room. Then they went on to the next town. Oh, music, don't stop playing now. There we go. They stopped at a restaurant and had breakfast. When they told the owner where they had stayed, he was shocked. That can't be, he said. That house burned to the ground 10 years ago. The old man and woman who lived there died in the fire. The young couple could not believe it, so they went back to the house. Only now there was no house. All they found was a burnt-out shell. They stood staring at the ruins, trying to understand what had happened. Then the woman started screaming. In the rubble there was a badly burned table, and on the table was the envelope they had left there that morning. Oh dear. Oh my. That is so scary. Shall we move on to just one more? This one's called Something Was Wrong. Something Was Wrong is a creepy story about a man who wakes up in the middle of the street and is puzzled when he discovers that everyone is afraid of him. It was based on a short anecdote in the book Try and Stop Me by Benedict Cuff. A version of this short story appears in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the same version I'm about to read you. One morning a man found himself walking along a deserted street in a small town. He had no idea what he was doing there, or how he got there in the first place, or where he had been earlier. He didn't even know what time it was. He saw a woman walking toward him and stopped her. "I'm afraid I forgot my watch," he said with a polite smile. "Can you please tell me the time?" When the woman saw him, she screamed and ran away. The man was shocked. A few minutes later he noticed that other people were afraid of him too. Whenever they saw him coming, they flattened themselves against a building, recoiled in horror, or ran across the street to stay out of his way. There must be something wrong with me, thought the man. I'd better go home as soon as possible. He hailed a taxi, but when the taxi driver laid eyes on him, he floored the accelerator and sped away. This is crazy, the man said to himself. He couldn't figure out what was wrong and had no idea what was going on. All he knew was that he was scared and confused. Maybe my wife can come and pick me up, he thought. He found a telephone and called home, expecting to hear his wife's sweet voice. Instead, a strange voice answered. "Is Mrs. Sullivan there?" he asked. "I'm sorry, she isn't," the voice said. "Her husband died a few days ago in a horrible car crash, and she's attending his funeral." Oh, my goodness. How very, very frightening. And good morning, Mum. Good morning to you. Thank you for being here. Good to see you. Anyway, those were 3 scary stories to tell in the dark. I know it's a shorter story time than usual, but I think it's time for bed. So, I will wrap it up there. And Until next time, dear readers, / listeners, / viewers, I bid you adieu. Keep in mind, next time is tomorrow, when I will be reading Goosebumps. So, please do have a wonderful, wonderful evening.